So let's get started. Please use the headphones because you are not meant to hear me speaking just with this. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Filippo Calcerano, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this session on built heritage as a driver for climate action. I extend a warm welcome on behalf of our session partners, the Institute of Heritage Science of the National Research Council of Italy, Climate Heritage Network and its working group 3, Europa Nostra, ICLEI, Architecture 2030, the International Union of Architects, and the European Research Infrastructure on Heritage Science. A brief word about the institution I represent. The Institute of Heritage Science is an interdisciplinary research body that is dedicated to scientific excellence and innovation in the understanding, conservation, and enhancement of cultural heritage. We bridge humanities, experimental sciences, and technology through collaborative research. As we gather for COP29, we recognize that this edition comes with its challenges and contradictions. Yet, rather than focusing on those, let us center ourselves on what brought us here today, our shared conviction and hopes for a better future. Today, we come together not just as representatives of our institutions, but as a global community united by common goals and values. This meeting is a testament of our collective commitment to fostering dialogue, promoting collaboration, and addressing the urgent challenges of climate change through the lens of cultural heritage, as together we are paving the way for impactful solutions. Thank you all for your dedication, your vision and commitment. I am confident that the effort we represent here across COPs, international and national platforms and partnership with policymakers, regulatory bodies, professionals, and the research community will continue to produce meaningful outcomes for the benefit of all. Welcome, and let us embark on this journey together. To begin, I would now like to invite the Italian ambassador in Baku, Luca Di Gianfrancesco, to share a few words of institutional greetings.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear speakers, good afternoon. It is a pleasure and an honor to extend my greetings and the greetings of the Italian government to everyone gathered here today. We're deeply proud to support this important initiative, which unites diverse voices and expertise from across the world to address shared global challenges. I'd like to thank the Climate Heritage Network and the Europa Nostra, the International Union of Architects, the Global Network of Local Governments for Sustainability, and the UNFCCC. And I would like to thank in particular, of course, the Institute of Heritage Science of the National Research Council of Italy that organized this event, also for the cooperation with the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the framework of the Memorandum of Understanding to promote Italian research and innovation also in foreign markets. We recognize the urgent threat of climate change and the construction sector's pivotal role in the energy and green transition. Italy has a long-standing commitment to international cooperation, particularly in advancing cultural preservation, environmental sustainability, and heritage protection. In this regard, Italy serves as a unique laboratory for testing innovative methodologies that integrate environmental design with conservation theory, fostering a community of researchers and practitioners dedicated to driving energy efficiency and environmental improvements in built heritage, all within the boundaries of one of the world's most advanced regulations on heritage conservation. In this spirit, We believe that gatherings like this one hold tremendous potential to foster meaningful dialogue and catalyze impactful solutions. We fully support the clear and ambitious objectives of this meeting. We're confident that the ideas, collaborations, and insights that emerge from this event will significantly advance our shared goals. Thank you for your dedication, for your presence here today, for your everyday commitment, and we look forward to the inspiring discussions and outcomes ahead. Best wishes for a productive and successful event. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Ambassador. So, it's truly a pleasure for me to introduce our keynote speaker today. I remember first meeting him in person 2 COPs ago in Egypt, and I was thrilled. It was like meeting a hero. And I had already seen his presentation on the Cultural Heritage Green Paper developed by Climate Heritage Network and Europa Nostra, and was struck by the depth of his insight and the clarity with which he shared them. I mean, the document itself was impressive, but this explanation made it feel both accessible and compelling. I believe there is a unique blend of skill and perhaps a bit of magic in how he manages to bring people together, finding the right supporter for our cause, uniting them and inspiring them to feel genuinely connected to the greater goal we all share. Andrew, the floor is yours. Andrew Potts.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. It's my pleasure to be back in the Italian pavilion at COP29. The ambassador alluded to this, but it's not a coincidence. We're in the Italian pavilion. The Italian pavilion and Italy, the Italian government, have consistently shown a concern and interest, advocacy for culture-based climate action. And so I thank them for that, and I thank the colleagues that have taken this agenda forward. As you heard, my name is Andrew Potts. I actually am representing 3 different organizations today, and I'm going to take just a minute to tell you about them, mostly so you can get a flavor for the different ways that the arts, culture, and heritage sectors have organized themselves to engage with the climate crisis. First, I'm here on behalf of the Climate Heritage Network. Filippo alluded to that. CHN is a global network now of more than 500 organizations, arts, culture, and heritage organizations, units of government, cultural institutions, that works to unlock the power of culture and heritage to help people imagine and realize low carbon, just, climate resilient futures. So that's the CHN. Second, I'm here on behalf of Europa Nostra and the European Heritage Hub. Europa Nostra is the voice of civil society in Europe committed to cultural heritage. And Europa Nostra and 20 other partners, including ICLE, launched 2 years ago a European Union project called the European Heritage Hub. The idea of this project is really interesting. It starts with the notion that the cultural heritage sector in Europe is not ready for the transformation that the world is undergoing, the so-called triple transformation: digital, social, and green. And the hub has the ambitious goal of preparing the cultural heritage sector in Europe to not just thrive, but lead in green, social, and digital transformation. And so it's an exciting project, and you can see how it connects to our topic today. And then finally, I represent the Preserving Legacies project. Preserving Legacies is a project funded by the National Geographic Society, and it has the goal of supporting locally led efforts to adapt heritage sites and cultural practices around the world to the growing risks of climate impacts. And I'm happy to mention this adaptation dimension, and I'm happy that the program speaks to mitigation, but yes, also adaptation, because as we take forward the mitigation efforts regarding the built environment, we have to simultaneously attend to the adaptation piece. So on behalf of those groups, I thank the organizers. So the topic today, built heritage as a driver for climate action. The ambassador mentioned already the innovative work being done in Italy and also done around the world on the methodologies, the interventions, the material science dealing with the built environment and the climate crisis, especially mitigation. And I'm not going to touch on that. I'm going to leave to our experts from the Italian National Research Council and from ISPC to speak to those that innovative work. What I want to do is just zoom out a little bit and speak more broadly to the context in which this work is happening. And the context in which this work is happening is the climate crisis. And we know that the climate crisis is so far getting worse, not better. We know that the world is dangerously off track to meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement, on track to 2.5, 3 degrees of global warming, catastrophic. The UN Secretary General said not too long ago that the status quo is a damning indictment of failed climate leadership. Yesterday, here in Baku, Mr. Gutierrez said that 2024 has been a masterclass in human destruction. So, okay, that sounds bad. How could this be happening? I mean, think about how much time and attention the climate crisis is receiving. What are we missing? What isn't being tried? Who's not at the table of designing the climate response? I mean, how are we so far off track? And increasingly, we hear from climate scientists, not Andrew Potts, climate scientists, that one of the reasons why climate action, climate policy is failing is because it fails to engage with the historic origins of anthropogenic climate change, and it fails to engage with the social and cultural enablers of green transformation. Put more simply, it doesn't try to help people imagine what a post-carbon, climate-resilient world might look like. It's an ecosystem, a climate policy ecosystem that's focused on technocratic and market-based solutions and largely ignores rights-based, place-based, demand-side, and people-centered strategies. Also, not enough diverse voices at the table of climate governance. So for all these reasons and others, we know that currently we are off track. We're not on course to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. When you think about those limitations, those gaps I just mentioned, especially this idea that we're not helping people imagine what a post-carbon green future could look like, culture and heritage offer one of the best platforms, one of the best vectors for filling those gaps, for valorizing diverse knowledge systems, to bringing diverse actors to the table, to leveraging creativity, all these dimensions. But for now, those attributes are really not valorized in climate planning and policy. You need look only at COP28 last year. What was the marquee decision of COP28? The global stocktake, the GST. The GST was supposed to look at why we were off track over the last 5 years and suggest ways to fix it going forward. The scientific synthesis report that was prepared before Dubai said one of the issues was not enough attention to the social enablers of green transformation and the social also barriers. That was deleted from the final GST. So the final GST is completely silent on anything to do with the social and cultural barriers and enablers of green transformation. And so we're still off track, and it's worse than that, actually, because the GST is meant then to guide governments in making their new nationally determined contributions, their new 5-year plans. And the guidance they got on how to make their new 5-year plans is silent on whether they should address social and cultural dimensions. And so this is worrisome, but there was also good news in Dubai. In Dubai, a group of national governments, 33 national governments, came together to launch something called the Group of Friends of Culture-Based Climate Action at the UNFCCC. These are national governments that are committed to elevating the role of culture and heritage in the UNFCCC. And I'm very happy to say that Italy was a founding member of the Group of Friends, also Germany, also Spain, a number of countries in Europe and around the world. It's growing. France just joined 2 months ago, the Group of Friends. But if your country has not joined the Group of Friends, I urge you to ask them to do this. You can go to www.climateheritage.org and look at a list of the current members. On Friday, there will be the second ever high-level ministerial dialogue on culture-based climate action. And even if your country is not a member of Group of Friends, you can still get an observer delegate to attend on Friday. So don't miss that opportunity. The Climate Heritage Network, in partnership with the Group of Friends, have launched something called the Global Call to put cultural heritage, arts, and creative sectors at the heart of climate action. And what this campaign seeks to do, is secure the adoption at COP30 next year in Belém, Brazil, of a decision of the COP that would start the process of creating the first ever work plan for culture of the UNFCCC. This would embed culture transversally across all of the subsidiary bodies and work programs of the UNFCCC. And so here in Baku, we're actually trying to get a little language inserted into the cover decision that would lay the foundation for that decision next year. But please follow that process if you can. So let me wrap up and just return to the topic of buildings. I said at the beginning that culture and heritage can help fill these gaps, can help people imagine and realize what a post-carbon future looks like, can supplement technocratic solutions with rights-based and place-based solutions. But you might be saying, but no, we're here to talk about buildings. We're not here to talk about any of those things. What is Andrew Potts trying to say to me? Of course, we're here to talk about buildings and the greenhouse gas emissions that go along with operating buildings. But when you talk about buildings, and particularly historic buildings, now you're also talking about the knowledge systems that created those low-carbon historic buildings. You're talking about valorizing diverse knowledge systems. When you're talking about reusing existing buildings, you're talking about circular, not linear economies. You're talking about a model of reuse and conservation that is grounded in ethics that are fundamentally a counterpoint to the make-take-waste attitudes that gave us anthropogenic climate change. So in this session, we are not talking about a small topic. We are not talking about a marginal topic. We're not talking about something you do after you've done all the important things. We're really fundamentally talking about the ethics and values and knowledge systems that will help us tackle anthropogenic climate change. And so thank you to colleagues for bringing these ideas forward, and thank you for your interest in joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic, but I already knew. And every time I hear you speak, you recharge my energy and will to fight. And also, working in this field, I feel less alone, that we are a group and that we are not alone in our mission to make built heritage part of the solution to climate change and not just a victim. Thank you again. So our next speaker is an architect with an incredible ability to identify barriers and develop solutions that empower policymakers, practitioners, and building owners to meet climate goals through building reuse. She's been instrumental in advancing carbon accounting methods for existing and historic buildings and has been a huge support in organizing this meeting, even through the August break. Thank you again, Laurie. I'm truly looking forward to hearing Architecture's 2030 perspective on post-COP28 and COP29 discussion on this critical topic. Though we are sorry she can't join us in person, it's my pleasure to introduce you Laurie Ferris. Laurie, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Filippo. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you. Try to share the screen.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be able to join you from Boston and an honor to participate with this group. I'm a senior fellow of Architecture 2030. Architecture 2030 is a global NGO think tank dedicated to transforming the built environment from a major source of climate change to a primary solution. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of Built Buildings Lab, a new NGO dedicated to elevating existing and historic buildings as climate action and climate justice solutions in both policy and practice. As mentioned, I am here to talk about the role of built heritage in climate strategies coming out of COP28 last year. As we heard from Andrew, there's tremendous momentum, particularly in the building sector coming out of the last COP in Dubai. And what this means is that it is at an especially critical moment in time to shift the prevailing narrative in around built heritage from one of heritage buildings as victims of climate change to one of heritage as a vital source of climate solutions. Yes. So the built environment, as we know, is a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, representing about 42% of all emissions, as you can see in the pie chart. The energy used to operate our existing and heritage structures is about 2/3 of that portion, while the embodied carbon of all materials that go into new buildings, new infrastructure, and major renovations account for the other third. All of this needs to become zero. And this is why our existing and historic buildings represent such an incredible opportunity to reduce emissions, because when we reuse these buildings that we already have, we can both improve their energy efficiency and move towards renewable energy sources to reduce the operational portion. And we can avoid embodied carbon by minimizing the need for new materials to be extracted and manufactured. But of course, we know that the power of built heritage goes well beyond carbon emissions. At the Buildings and Climate Global Forum earlier this year, where I was with many people on this panel today, and with the Climate Heritage Network and Architecture 2030, we were there to represent the importance of heritage in building sector climate policy. And in our session, I posed this question: what positive impacts do existing and heritage structures bring to building sector climate action? The audience provided the answers you see here. Of course, we acknowledge the historic buildings offer a huge opportunity for decarbonization through avoided carbon and low carbon materials, but also that wisdom and knowledge about how to live and build in climate responsive, place-based ways, skills of care and materials repair over time. And of course, as Andrew mentioned, those critical cultural drivers that are needed to mobilize the all of society response that we really need now to address the climate emergency. So last year at COP28, we saw two major parallel milestones. The second, Andrew touched on, the group of Friends of Culture-Based Climate Action, the first time that there was a convening of ministers of parties of countries specifically to talk about centering culture into the heart of climate action. And at the same time, we saw an important advancement for the building sector with the announcement of the Buildings Breakthrough led by France and Morocco. And in this commitment, we saw 28 countries come together for the first time to commit to near zero resilient buildings, both new buildings and existing buildings, as the norm by the year 2030. A few months later, in March of this year, as I mentioned, the Buildings and Climate Global Forum was held by the UN Environment Programme and the government of France to advance the buildings breakthrough specifically. This event was the first time that the UN had convened global leaders on this topic of climate action in the built environment. And the outcome of that meeting was the Déclaration de Chaillot, which was signed by 70 governments and illustrates a common vision for what it means to work toward a zero emissions resilient environment. And the good news is that existing buildings, local knowledge, these concepts feature quite prominently throughout the document, which we consider to be a real achievement. On the other hand, there's a major omission of words, culture, and heritage in the document, although the concepts are there. And so to me, each of these instances where the document mentions reuse and retrofit, where it talks about material circularity and passive strategies, the ideas of traditional approaches, of low-tech solutions, and local knowledge or local know-how, as they say, these are all opportunities for the heritage field to come in to demonstrate leadership and to bring forth replicable solutions. We've also seen, in addition to that global advancement, we've seen a lot of movement at the national and subnational levels in many places over this past year. I highlight just two examples here. The EU's recast of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the EPBD, which creates a framework to accelerate renovations and demonstrates a major leap forward in built environment climate policy by addressing whole life carbon. On the right, here in the United States, the federal government issued this definition of zero emissions buildings to align our goals. And this sets targets for performance for both new and existing buildings, focused now solely on operational emissions. And I think both of these policies illustrate the importance of this moment in time for built heritage, because while both examples could serve as opportunities to integrate cultural heritage solutions into climate policy through buildings, there's also, of course, the potential for the opposite to happen, where we see the mass application of industrial retrofit solutions rather than heritage-informed approaches, and we can see heritage buildings, in fact, excluded and left behind. So I think this is a really pivotal time to take the seat at the table and to really demonstrate the necessity of heritage as an important strategy within these policies. And of course, that's the top-down policy. We also see a continued proliferation of inspiring ground-up, locally based heritage solutions in the built environment. Here are just a few that I've been inspired by recently, including the transformation of a vacant school in an underinvested neighborhood in the Midwest of America into a high-performance center for community revitalization. On the top right, we see a picture from the city of San Antonio in Texas in the United States, where they've created, they're really creating a circular economy and preserving heritage materials through their deconstruction ordinance and workforce training programs. On the bottom left, Yasmin Lari's incredible work in Pakistan training climate refugees in vernacular construction techniques and in working local materials so that they can self-build disaster-resilient housing. And on the bottom right, using vernacular traditional methods and passive design approaches in Singapore to retrofit a brutalist structure into a net zero biophilic architecture school. So all of these examples demonstrate the breadth of the capacity of cultural heritage to lead in building sector climate action. And I'm really thrilled. Again, like Andrew, I wear multiple hats, and one of them is with the Climate Heritage Network. And I'm really thrilled to announce the Imagining Low Carbon, Just, Climate Resilient Futures Through Culture and Heritage project, which Andrew Potts was really instrumental in bringing about. This new Climate Heritage Network project, supported by the Mellon Foundation and others, is going to increase culture-based climate action, transform climate policy via cultural heritage, and support partner communities. You can see all of our partners, the participants here on the screen. The project is made up of 5 initiatives, 2 of which are going to strengthen the Climate Heritage Network's activities by creating regional secretariats in the United States and in Africa. And the other 3 are thematic activities. One is Heritage Adapts to Climate Action, which is led by Preserving Legacies and Andrew. So you can talk to him more about that. This is about, again, driving local resilience and adaptation measures. The second is Race to Resilience Culture, led by ICLEI, and this is really about supporting cities, local governments in quantifying the cultural impacts of resilience strategies. And the last is Decarbonizing the Built Environment Through Heritage, which is led by my organization, Built Buildings Lab, and supported by Architecture 2030 and the University of Lagos. And this DBTH project is really framed around 3 questions. What on-the-ground examples, such as the ones I just showed you, couple climate mitigation and cultural heritage strategies? How do both communities, people, and the environment benefit from these strategies? And what are the policy levers we need to deliver these at scale? And so the outcomes over the next couple of years will include a toolkit with recommendations for policy pathways that enable the scaling of heritage solutions, and a messaging campaign to activate heritage organizations with aligned messaging around built heritage as climate action. So stay tuned for more on that over the next year or 2. And I'll just end with this quote by Albert Einstein, which I think is so timely, that he said, "We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if mankind is to survive." I think it's true now more than ever. And so let's use cultural heritage to catalyze this new manner of thinking about how we can collectively achieve a decarbonized, resilient, and just built environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Lori. Those insightful remarks and the global perspective of your talk, showing how, despite national differences, cultural heritage holds shared characteristics that strengthen our collective efforts. And see you at the round table in a while. And after these 2 interventions, we now have a clearer view of the path ahead informed by past progress and driven by a strategic global perspective and a sense of urgency. Now let's shift the focus to a more grounded approach, one rooted in the here and now, allowing our panelists to showcase opportunities for immediate emission reduction and enhanced climate resilience through the energy and environmental improvement of built heritage, supported by project policies and tools from around the world. Our first speaker in this panel is an esteemed colleague and a bright mind in the field of built heritage diagnostics. She isn't an architect, which in this setting is a unique advantage, as she brings a fresh perspective on how social science and humanities in Europe are addressing climate change, particularly through the powerful tools of the research infrastructure. Please join me in welcoming Elena Verticchio.
Well, thank you, Filippo, for the introduction. Good afternoon, and sorry for my voice. I'll present the European research infrastructure on heritage science and how it can contribute towards data-driven retrofit of historic buildings. Just as an initial premise, heritage science draws on diverse humanities, sciences, and engineering disciplines to increase the understanding, conservation, and sustainable use of heritage. As we've seen for our greatest previous introduction, heritage science applied to built heritage is able to foster cross-fertilization among various disciplines, can serve as a stress test for technological applications, and can act as a beacon for innovation and technological transfer for the entire architectural, engineering, and construction sector, providing valuable traditional design knowledge adapted to local climate conditions. Despite the European Union having strongly committed on energy efficiency of the construction sector, this potential still remains largely untapped. Anyhow, the wealth of scientific knowledge applied to heritage is a key asset in effectively addressing climate change adaptation and mitigation, as emphasized in recent initiatives and reports by international groups like the International Council of Museums and Sites, the European Open Method Coordination Group, and the Joint Programming Initiatives on Cultural Heritage and Climate. As far as the regulatory framework on the energy performance of historical buildings is concerned, regulations such as the newly updated EPBD and the standard 16883 are progressively shifting towards a more process-oriented approach, aimed at improving their performance rather than requiring the compliance of standard values. Nevertheless, the application of these standards is hindered by potential users by insufficient availability of data, expertise, and consensus on the specificities of historic buildings. Indeed, when it comes to study the behavior of historic building, several complexities have to be faced, including the need to find bespoke approaches tailored on a case-by-case study and to get to know the analytical properties of ancient materials, which require advanced methods and instruments that are still limited to highly specialized teams. To overcome such barriers is therefore key to enhance the availability of experimental data and a better integration in diagnostic tools, also leveraging digital informative management systems. And here is where the European research infrastructure for heritage science comes into play. Following the roadmap of the European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructure, IRIS for the heritage science and DARIA for the digital humanities act as key innovation enablers. in the field, catalyzing the development of an informed and collaborative community and ensuring the capability and the capacity to meet user demand and deliver scientific excellence. The goal of IRIS is to grow and strengthen frontier research in heritage science, offering integrated access to interdisciplinary expertise, data, and technologies for a wide range of stakeholders. IRIS has recently celebrated 20 years of activity across Europe, and it's currently in its implementation phase, so advancing the process to establish the European Research Infrastructure Consortium. To address its mission, the infrastructure is organized into 4 platforms based on the different services they provide. So the Arch Lab to physical and digital scientific archives, Fixed Lab to non-transportable and medium and large-scale analytical instruments, MOLAB for mobile diagnostic tools, and DigiLab, which is still under development, and that will provide digital tools within an open science approach based on findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reuse principles. IRIS users can be either teams or individuals from private and public institutions, including academia, research centers, and industry, working on heritage case studies. The selection procedures for user access is based on the submission of a proposal, which is peer-reviewed by external experts, and then assessed in terms of its, on its overall feasibility by a local technical committee. MOLAB is the mobile laboratory of IRIS and offers the possibility to bring instruments directly to the objects of study. Within MOLAB, the Energy and Environmental Analysis Facility provides access to advanced technologies and procedures for more effective diagnostic approaches on built heritage. The workflow, which you can see here, for the energy and environmental improvement of heritage building integrates the diagnostic analysis, producing the geometric and/or analytical data, and can leverage both building information modeling and building information building performance simulation to inform conservation strategies and to design scientifically grounded retrofit intervention. The process is scalable according to the needs and the purpose of the case study and has been developed within the BIP project that later Letizia Martinelli will show. The diagnostic equipment that can be accessed within the facility include high-resolution infrared thermography, also drone-based, advanced geometric survey like SLAM for the simultaneous localization and mapping, and high-resolution cameras for the spherical photogrammetry, together with other diagnostic instruments such as a blower dot test, IoT heat flux measuring system, an IoT environmental monitoring system, and other supporting devices as a covimeter, an hygrometer, and a videoscope. The key takeaway is that IRIS can become a powerful strategic hub for built heritage retrofit, contributing to enhance data-driven decision-making, to foster technology transfer, and new policies, new informed policies by data, in turn strengthening mitigation and adaptation efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Elena. The idea that research infrastructure of this scale can support even the most complex intervention is reassuring in a way that we know that no building will be left behind, whatever its complexity. Next, we'll hear from ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, a global network of more than 2,500 local and regional governments committed to sustainable urban development, with active projects in over 125 countries. Examining this issue from the perspective of local governments is particularly valuable, as it is at this level that high-level concepts are applied to the realities of everyday life. Our speaker is an architect and sustainable urban developer practitioner representing ICLEI in Brussels. He focuses on resilience and adaptation with key roles in the mission of adaptation and the Covenant of Mayors. Please join me in welcoming Luca Arbau.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I am Luca Arbau from ICLEI Europe. Very excited to be here, not only because I'm an architect, but also because I think that in this session we are talking of an issue that is really, it explains why us as ICLEI, but also other partners in the LGMA, in the local governments and municipal authorities, constituencies, we are here at COP. Because it really puts some issues at the top level when we look into heritage buildings and like where coordination it's a real issue that we have to face. Just to give a bit of context, why am I here? I represent ICLEI, as it was said before. It's a global network representing over 2,500 local and regional governments around the world. All these regional and local governments are committed to sustainability, and the important thing I want to highlight is that the way they understand sustainability and we explain sustainability to our members is an integrated definition that puts together different pathways that we call, specifically 5 pathways, looking into nature-based, zero-emission, resilient, equitable, and circular development. We do this because we really believe that only by looking at this issue in an integrated way, and you can see like in the figure on the right, we have also one of the leaves representing the building sector. When looking into the building sector, we really need to understand where these different development pathways are intersecting and what happens in this intersection. And we do this also through the Covenant of Mayors Europe, where ICLEI is one of the implementing partners. And the Covenant of Mayors is the world's largest movement of local climate and energy action. And as you can see in the figure, it puts in the center 3 main pillars, which are adaptation, mitigation, and energy poverty. And these 3 pillars make sense only if they are tackled like in a cross-cutting way. As you can see, like the Covenant of Mayors aims to put together like all the laws coming from the European Commission and the European Parliament, but also projecting them into how the local and regional government can translate them into action. When thinking of this session, the first project that came to my mind was the ARC project that I was involved in. This is like a European funded project that was looking specifically into the intersection between cultural heritage management, disaster risk management, and climate change adaptation. And I think it's very interesting the way that historic areas were defined, because they were defined as socio-ecological systems. This means they were, in this project, we put together different elements, so the people element, the natural environment, culture, economy, politics, all together to define what an historic area is. And in doing this, it also recalls what in the last COP was done with the joint statement on climate, people, and nature, and where basically it was emphasized already that we need to really put integrated action, looking into adaptation, mitigation, culture, energy poverty, but also health, biodiversity, all together. And only by doing this, we will understand how a single building cannot be retrofit if we're not thinking of the people that are living that building, they are visiting that building, or also the nature that is around that building. The ARC project also defined the resilience of historic areas, and in this definition, I think it's important to highlight that there are these aspects of interconnection, of a continuous process, of dynamism, and importantly also of the need for social justice. So it's important, this definition that you could see in the screen, because it really highlights that although when we talk about an historical building, an historic area, we think normally of the materials that compose the historical building, we also need to understand that the people that live there need to be able to continue doing this, be able to continue visiting it, to be able to use the building, because otherwise that building will not function in itself as a service to the society. And this is the framework that was created through the ARC project, that it's basically composed of two main phases, one normal operation phase and one emergency operating phase. As you can see, this is the way that we are putting together those three elements that I mentioned before: the disaster risk management, the climate change adaptation, and the heritage management. And I will not go into the details because I don't have time, but you can also find the detailed steps of these frameworks as a SEN workshop agreement that was developed in collaboration with the DIN German standardization body, and that it's a key document for then arriving to, hopefully in a close future, the standardization of this approach. But the main question that I have here is, who is responsible for this? And in the image that you see on the left side, this is coming from a different project under the mission and adaptation that is trying to highlight which are the stakeholders, not that have to be engaged when talking about resilient buildings, but they need to own the resilient process when we are talking about a building. And this maybe here it's not so clear, but the thing that I want to highlight, I think there are three main points. The first one, that we need collaboration between different departments. Because if the heritage managers are not talking to the climate change managers, we will not manage to have a sustainable process to manage the building itself and to understand how to refurbish it, how to retrofit it, etc. Just a mention, we have further explained this detailed problem talking with heritage managers in a 3-day workshop that concluded with this publication that you see on the right side, that we did ICLE in collaboration with the Organization of World Heritage Cities. On a second level, the multi-level collaboration is also important. If we don't create a policy environment that allows for also a flow of funding from top to down, or also new innovative ways to also attract funding from the bottom up, we will not be able to fund this process and to be able to implement it. And third, also the collaboration with the private sector. The money is not only in the public sector. If we want really to scale this up, to move this forward, the retrofitting has to engage also the private sector. I will be super quick in 2 case studies. The first one is from the ARC project, and specifically the city of Hamburg. They focus on a historical area that is one of the most attractive areas of the city. There is the Speicherstadt and the Kontorus district, including particularly the Chilean House, which is a very important historical building in the city. And through this project, they wanted to basically preserve this area, but also retrofit some key buildings that were particularly damaged by climate change in order to make sure ensure of a sustainable process in the long term, a sustainable conservation. The one thing that I wanted to highlight is that they develop a sort of digital twin, so a BIM model, that it's putting together different elements of the building, different information, different data concerning not only climate change adaptation, but also climate change mitigation, general information on the building, weather information, etc. And why did they do this? They did this to also explain the issue they were facing from a climate change perspective to the heritage managers, to the population, to the politicians. So basically, the creation of this BIM model was really co-created because we wanted to ensure that the language that was used, but also the way that the information was presented was really easy to understand for different kind of people. And secondly, I think also it's important the way that they work with their planning and particularly with the World Heritage Site management plan, which started integrating also climate change impacts consideration and also the alignment that they did of this planning with the UNESCO periodic reporting. Finally, these are just some images of the district. It's super beautiful. The second example, and I will close, it's in Urbino in Italy specifically, where basically the city was selected under the Covenant of Mayors for the implementation of technical assistance under the so-called policy support facility, which I had also the honor to lead. And basically what Urbino put like in the front, like as an issue they wanted to face and they wanted technical support on, was the development of a co-implementation agenda. They understood that they had so big biodiversity, land degradation issues that were affecting the historical buildings in the city, and they wanted to tackle it with a wide range of stakeholders that, thanks to also our just transition technical support, as we managed to implement. And this is a process that, of course, Urbino is still continuing, but we are also looking forward to the finalization of it. Some final reflections. So understanding the historical areas, socio-ecological systems for aiming at holistical planning. Also understanding that a sustainable heritage building cannot be only high performant in terms of energy efficiency, but must be also resilient to the transformation and climate change. That collaboration across city department in a multi-level way and also with the private sector is key, and that we need to now enable spaces for this collaboration, because the framework we have it, the solutions we have them, but now we need also to create these spaces for cities to work on this. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca, for sharing such a comprehensive and multidimensional perspective on the social aspects and also the crucial role of multi-stakeholder actions. Our next speaker is not only an esteemed colleague, but also a dear friend. Letizia Martinelli is an architect, BIM manager, and a skilled expert in environmental design for both heritage open space and historic buildings. She's also one of the most talented research managers I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And over the years, we navigated many projects together, including one particularly close to my heart, where alongside Elena Gigliarelli, we developed an advanced, flexible, and scalable approach for improving the energy and environmental behavior of historic buildings across different market maturity and national contexts. It's an honor to introduce her today. Please join me in welcoming Letizia Martinelli. Buon divertimento.
Thank you, Filippo, for your very, very kind words. And so now I will talk to you about a B project, that is the acronym of BIM for the energy efficiency of the public sector. The project was founded by the European Neighbourhood Programme NEC-BC Med, that now became Interreg Next Med, coordinated by ISPC and involving 8 countries in 8 partners in 7 countries on the Mediterranean basin. Aim of B project was to develop a workflow to support the energy and environmental improvement of public historical buildings, integrating the use of building performance simulation and heritage BIM, and also trying to address the management of the workflow from public bodies and also financing mechanism to fund the interventions. So, the main theme of BIP is the one of building performance simulation, so BPS, that is based on a simplified model of a building that in our case was used to represent the current and future energy and environmental behavior of the building. And BPS is very promising for built heritage because it allows to understand and analyze complex phenomena and to have a feedback on the energy and environmental implications of design solution very early in the design process. And we also coupled it with BIM, that Luca was already talking about, that is based on the creation and updating of an information system of a building that combines the 3D representation of building element with semantic information. And BIM is getting traction in application to heritage, the so-called heritage BIM, because it centralized the management and production of information to support documentation, conservation, and enhancement activities, ensuring the consultation and implementation of data and the sharing of data among different experts. And this idea of a information management system was also very important for us to structure the workflow of BIP and to support simulation with a federation of different types of models. Despite the potential of these tools, BPS in particular is still not widespread in the use for historical buildings. And this is because of the inherent complexities of historical buildings, because of the limitations of software that still are not able to understand the specificity of historical buildings, for example, moisture transport or massive behavior. And another thing that Luca was stressing, and that for us is also very, very important, the difficulties in building a common knowledge framework among different experts, in this case among conservation experts and energy experts. Moreover, an HBIM model already contains a lot of data that could be used for simulation, for example, data on materials, data on stratigraphy. But the interoperability among the two software is still hindered by their differences in understanding the building, by the limitations and still need of development of interoperability formats, and again, the lack of a common understanding among experts, because each expert in the interoperability process should work and be kept in his comfort zone, but within a unified and comprehensive framework. Another last but not least issue that BIP tried to solve was the idea of funding, of financing, and we addressed the use of energy performance contracting that involved an energy service company to provide the financing of interventions based on the energy and cost savings that could be obtained from the retrofit of buildings. These challenges and issues were addressed by the BIP workflow in a way that was already introduced by Elena, because it's the same that we want to apply to the use of MOLAB in the IRIS infrastructure. So we start with very detailed analysis of the building, whose results are funneled into an HBIM model that is used to define a simulation to understand the current state of the building and to develop and test design solution that could be then be funded with financing mechanisms such as APC. This workflow was tested by us in an Italian case study, Palazzo Maffei Borghese, in the city center of Rome. Starting with an historical and architectural analysis that for us is the backbone of any study on historical buildings. It was followed by a geometric survey using an instrument that is also present in IRIS. That's a portable LiDAR tool that is able to acquire the point cloud of the building while moving through it. So it's very, very fast and quite accurate. And we also performed a general conservation state, especially on the facades of the building. All this data we put together to develop the first hypothesis on the homogeneous wall stratigraphies of the building that then we wanted to test qualitatively with infrared thermography and quantitatively with heat flux meter. Infrared thermography was also used to analyze construction techniques, thermal bridges, and in general to understand what's behind the facade of the building. And we coupled thermography with sunshine hour simulation to select the best points for heat flux measurements. And these points should be the points that are more representative of the stratigraphies of the buildings and also with the less direct sunshine. And so heat flux meters was for us the way to quantitatively understand the thermophysical characteristics of the envelope. In parallel with all this analysis, we also performed a yearly environmental monitoring in some specific rooms in the building in order to have, together with the energy bills, data on relative humidity and temperature that could be used for the calibration of the simulation. And the BIM model follows this whole analysis because it was updated with data from acquired during the analysis phase, and so evolved along with the consolidation of the hypothesis on the building characteristics. This is a very, very short video showing you the model of the building. It's export in the interoperability format IC, and then its integration into the simulation software Thermolog. And as you see, we had to tweak some of the data, especially on the envelope, because interoperability is still far from ideal. And then we got to the results of the simulations, and we used these results to develop a set of improvement interventions based on design criteria on heritage compatibility, technical compatibility, and environmental sustainability. These interventions were grouped into 3 scenarios: short-term, middle-term, and long-term. And as you can see already from the short-term scenarios, we had a very high reduction of energy consumption. And here you see the most ambitious of these interventions about a bioclimatic buffer space, a photovoltaic buffer space in the cloister of the building. Going back to BIP as a whole, the project had many results for all its partners. We managed to establish a common framework among partners depending on local specificities. We exceeded the performance indicators set by NECBC MED program, and we helped spreading the use of EPC across the MED area, especially in the southern part. We had the possibility to test our workflow on 9 case studies, and we also published the case studies as an open access guide that, if you are interested, is available here, and that is can be used for dissemination, especially with experts and public bodies. We are still working on dissemination of the workflow. We are involved in expert teams and in international conferences such as this one. And lastly, we are very proud on the direct impact of VIP because VIP achieved the first HBIM-based implementation in Jordan, had a major role together with other NECBC MED projects in the first regulation of energy efficiency in Lebanon, and both the Valencia region and the municipality of Nicosia are committed to use the workflow in their renovation activities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Letizia. There's not much more to say about BIP, apart that while it was an incredibly tiring project, it was also extremely beautiful to complete. I think there is a problem with the connection of Lori. Okay, so I'm sharing again the screen. So, now we are also starting a similar project called Beacon, along with the University of Ferrara and the Roma Tor Vergata, Built Heritage Sustainable Conservation. And and if you want the paper copy of the guidelines, we have some here, or we have the QR code so that you can just download the PDF file to your smartphone. So, unfortunately, our next speaker couldn't make in time for the venue due to a setback, but she has kindly sent us a brief recorded message. It will be shorter than the other presentation, so please bear with us, and then we will quickly move to the roundtable. Professor Gawad is a distinguished educator in the field of architecture with extensive academic experience and significant contribution to international organizations focused on sustainable architecture and vernacular built environment. In her presentation, she will speak on behalf of the International Union of Architects, offering a global perspective for built heritage practitioners.
Alongside my colleague Gaetan Su, I'm representing the International Union of Architects, the UIA. Today, we will explore how the UIA is driving climate action through the preservation and adaptation of built heritage. Our initiatives focus on conserving cultural assets while simultaneously addressing urgent environmental challenges. Heritage buildings and sites are more than cultural landmarks. They are valuable resources for building sustainable and resilient cities. Our working groups and commissions integrate traditional building knowledge with modern sustainability practices by organizing webinars, launching competitions, and producing publication. Our first initiative is the UIA 2030 Award, in partnership with UN Habitat. This award recognizes architectural projects that support the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, particularly SDG number 11, which advocates for sustainable cities and communities in its second cycles, for which we recently announced the list of winners during the World Urban Forum in Egypt. One of our awardees is the rehabilitation of the historic center of Qalandiya in Palestine. This project highlights how revitalizing heritage sites can empower communities, strengthen cultural identity, and foster environmental stewardship. The second initiative is a joint activity between the Education Commission and the SDG Commission within the UIA. The UIA Education Commission SDG edition promotes SDG-aligned architectural education by celebrating institutions that incorporate sustainability into their curricula. A recent winner, Traditional Building Methods, New Adaptation at the Royal Danish Academy in Denmark, trains students to design climate-resilient building in vernacular communities. By combining practical experience with sustainable design, students learn how architecture can make a real-world impact, especially in the face of climate changes. The UIA Heritage and Cultural Identity Work Program is actively involved in initiatives and organizes webinars on various topics, such as the adaptive reuse of heritage buildings in relation to the SDGs and heritage as a source of resilience and humanity innovation. Also, through publications like the UIA Sustainable Development Guide, we share case studies and tools that promote sustainable architectural practices in order to save the heritage sites alongside achieving sustainability. To support climate-sensitive heritage preservation, the UIA and its regional sections developed a number of SDG guidebooks as comprehensive resources. These guidebooks provide practical guidance on topics such as adapting heritage buildings to environmental challenges, covering everything from sustainable materials to energy-efficient retrofitting. They empower architects to make informed climate-conscious decisions regarding heritage sites and others. We also had a recent webinar regarding the same topic. The UIA actively participates in global forums to advance sustainable architecture. At the recent World Urban Forum in Cairo and the Building and Climate Global Forum in Paris, we hosted sessions on the adaptive reuse of heritage buildings and their role in sustainable development. Similarly, at the Paris Forum on Climate and Building, the UIA advocated for global policy frameworks that prioritize heritage resilience. Other events such as the UIA Copenhagen Congress produced publications like Design for Climate Adaptation as proceedings of the UIA World Congress in Denmark. It also allowed several international architecture figures to share their expertise with young architects on their work related to heritage and climate. And finally, thank you for your time and attention. For more information on our initiatives, please visit our website at www.uiaarchitects.org.
Yeah, it's a real pity we won't have the opportunity to have Iman with us. But now it's roundtable time, so I don't want to miss the chance to ask all of you what comes next. So let's start with Luca. How do you think we can scale successful strategies and ensure they reach their full potential across different contexts? You have a couple of minutes.
All good with the sound, no? Okay. Thanks for the question. And actually, also, this is like the scaling up of action. It's what now we are looking more and more into also at ICLEI and in the Covenant of Mayors as well. I think like there is a big issue, a big elephant in the room in also here in Baku, no, that everyone is talking about financing, and this is the main issue that cities, the local governments are telling us repeatedly. We need to not only create new funding, but making sure that we are creating a flow of funding opportunities, but also unlocking financing options, creating this collaboration that I was mentioning before, no, with the private sector. So this is what now we need to explore. We are doing more and more, also looking into cultural heritage in the mission on adaptation at the European level, with projects, for example, as Climate Fit, looking exactly to this collaboration between private and public sector. But at the same time, there is another big problem. There is the collaboration between the national government and the subnational government. And this is really necessary to scale action up, because we still have barriers in the frameworks that we have at the national level that do not allow for the scaling up, for maximizing what we are doing, for bringing it to the next level, for replicating in certain contexts. Of course, like as I said before, we still need to put at the center culture. We still need to say that we need to preserve the culture and the history of the building of that on a historical area. At the same time, though, we need to understand how this combines with the need of for adaptation and for climate neutrality in the near future.
Thanks, Luca. I like to ask the same question to Elena about scaling successful strategies.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, we have talked a lot about the necessity to establish and consolidate a common framework, a community, a network. So what I feel is that we have a great opportunity with research infrastructure to go towards these directions, because they can help on a twofold way. The first one is, of course, about the regulatory point of view, because it can serve better collaboration among experts and stakeholders, so to enhance more fluid interaction between policies and practice, but also in terms of continuous learning and training, because it can strengthen and foster the capacity building of the sectors. So through webinars, lectures, and doctoral programs that can help highlighting the importance of continuously adapting our strategies, and also not just for early careers jobs, but also to consolidate professionals and researchers in the field.
Thank you, Elena. Now, Laurie. Laurie,
All right.
if you hear us, yes, I'd like to ask you about what are the most significant barriers to heritage-based climate action? 2 minutes.
So I want to touch on two different ideas, and I think actually both of them we've already heard so many solutions, which makes me very optimistic. But the first big barrier that I see is around metrics and frameworks that don't reflect the metrics and frameworks we use in our built environment today to measure progress towards climate action and towards energy use don't reflect the benefits, the value offered by built heritage often. So to give a very specific example, let's think about the way we relate human comfort with energy efficiency. Today, typically we design to control air temperature, and then we use energy and try and minimize energy based on how we can control air temperature. Whereas historically, we achieved human comfort based on a number of other metrics and variables, and including the way we hung drapery in the building and the way we use the building itself. And so when we can't measure and document and count and get credit for those approaches, it's really hard to demonstrate why they're so valuable. So I think this is one area where there's a lot of work to do to kind of advocate for more holistic systems of measurement and benchmarking. And the research you all are doing is so exciting on that front. The other piece, I think, is about collaboration, that sometimes the heritage fields can be a little bit insulated. And I think that, as I mentioned, I think the time is here for us to bring our solutions out of heritage to the broader industry. We have so much knowledge around maintenance in buildings, how to repair things, about how to think about buildings across a life cycle, the lessons of what we've learned from how buildings work over time, how new technologies work in old buildings. And this information and data is desperately needed in the mainstream design and construction field. So I was really excited to hear today from almost every speaker about new coalitions and new collaborations to really support work across the industry outside of heritage.
Thank you, Laurie. Letizia, I'd like to ask you the same question, if you may.
Does it work? Okay. So about barriers, I want to go back again to talk about a cultural barrier, that it's the lack of a common framework among experts. We have seen many types of lack of discourse, but this is mostly about the lack of a common framework between the conservation expert and the energy experts, because still by the conservation experts, cultural-based climate action is considered in conflict with conservation. It's considered something that is dangerous and that has to be avoided. While we are here to say and to advocate the opposite idea, that climate action is fundamental for conservation. It's fundamental for conservation now, and it's fundamental also because, as Loris was saying, historical buildings already have a lot of embedded knowledge on climate actions, because they were mostly built in a period where there was low energy, low tech solutions, and so they have to couple with that, and they developed a lot of passive strategies that could be useful now. And this change of perspective could also help with other barriers, for example, the barrier of regulation. We, in the Italian context, tend to avoid using energy efficiency to talk about historical buildings, but we prefer the term energy improvement, because and we're talking about the regulation, because the idea is that historical buildings have their own behavior that should be developed in a way to consume the less possible energy, but without defining specific standard or threshold, or, as Loris was saying, by defining new threshold and new standards that are specific for historical buildings.
Thank you, Letizia. And last but not least, Andrew, I'd like to ask you also about barriers, but I would also like to hand over to you for the final conclusion and to wrap up this session. It was really wonderful to have you all here. A lot of cool things was said, and Andrew, please go on.
Okay, well, thank you, Filippo. I said in the beginning that I think there's a major gap in climate planning and policy globally, inattention to the social and cultural dimensions of climate response, both to the cultural barriers and cultural enablers of green transformation. And this gap is fundamentally one of the reasons why we are not succeeding to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. There is progress happening. 5 years ago, I don't think this panel would have occurred at a COP. I don't think people with these expertises would have been at the COP. I don't think there would be a culture ministerial at the COP. There wasn't. I know there wasn't a culture ministerial at the COP like there is. So slowly, these knowledges, these expertises, these perspectives are being taken on board in climate action. But I think we have to concede that it's not at the scale that is going to open up 1.5 degree pathways. Still a marginal dimension, for example, of this COP. So how do we really scale up and out the activities that bring attention to the social and cultural dimensions of climate response? I think one of the leading edges, one of the most promising vectors for this is built heritage. Built heritage is a highly tangible, visible, understandable manifestation of culture and heritage. And in that way, more than any other dimension, I think, of culture and heritage, it has the opportunity to open the eyes of climate decision makers about the role of tradition, of values, of knowledge, of culture. And so I think the examples that we heard here today are not just valuable for decarbonizing the built environment, not just valuable for adapting the built environment, but really valuable for transforming the entire landscape of climate action by opening the eyes of climate decision makers to the power of heritage, and by opening the eyes of heritage colleagues of the role they can play in climate action. And so for that, I really thank everyone.
Thank you again, everyone. We ended, and thank you, Andrew, for your last words, and thank you all for being here. And hope to see you in the future COPs and future events like this, and to share this vision by all. And thank you. Thank you, Laurie. Also, just stay for a second. We take a picture all together, because you are on the screen, so you'll be also in the picture. We will have a picture with a giant lorry. That's the measure of how much we love you.
That's terrible.